Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this segment of Art Gives Us Hope Festival. My name is Carl Evans, and if you're just joining us now or been with us, we're going to a pre-record interviewing our next guest, Christopher LeMark of Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health, and we're going to jump right into things. So again, if you've been with us throughout the festival, you already know what's up. If you're just joining us for this segment and for the rest of the day, this is a pre-record, and we're starting things right now. So Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Very welcome.
It's our pleasure. And for those who don't know, although it'd be kind of hard not to because you've been getting a lot of the proper love and properly getting your flowers right now, let's talk about what is Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health.
Sure. Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health is a nonprofit organization where we focus on normalizing therapy, right? But we learned very quickly in order to do that, Carl, you have to meet people where they are. So in addition to paying for people to go to therapy and providing weekly group therapy conversations per our coffee shop model, which is our way of fundraising on a daily basis, we fight food insecurity and we try to figure out what are the things that are disrupting people's mental health, right? And so we have conversations, we raise dialogue, and we sit down with people of various workspaces, right? Jobs, position, everyday people to talk about some of the most simple things. And the question that we always start with is, how are you? And it really just started from my own stuff, me dealing with my own culmination of many things, right? Childhood trauma, what it means like to be abandoned, no parents, and sort of going through this life on my own, dealing with three different suicide attempts, which led me to a coffee shop in 2018, where I endured what I consider a mental and emotional breakdown that ultimately, Carl, became my biggest breakthrough because it pushed me to go to therapy. And it was in therapy as this failing hip hop artist, this 39-year-old guy turning 40 that didn't own anything, had some sort of an epiphany, like, wow, like what happened in that coffee shop and what has happened with me from a musical standpoint, it was only right that I would evolve to a space where I would dedicate my life to the normalization of therapy, but also talking about your mental health and creating safe spaces through the coffee shop model. So that is what Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health is in a nutshell.
Thanks so much, Christopher. And that's a real good way in a nutshell, keeping things concise. And obviously this journey was not something that just happened overnight for you. And in talking about where you were coming from in building the shop, what sort of, what were kind of the things that convinced you? So you had your lived experience, which was an inspiration, but what convinced you that just physically having a physical space would be part of the plan?
Yeah, so once I understood what Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health was, knowing that my initial breakdown and breakthrough happened in a safe space such as a coffee shop pre-pandemic, I knew right away that I needed to open up a coffee shop. It wasn't supposed to open until 2023, 24. But hey, like every one of us, we all had to make quite the adjustment, right? And we had to be flexible in our business plan. So it just really worked out. COVID happened for all of us as much as it was happening to us. And what it did for us, it rushed us to open up the coffee shop quickly. Because in the midst of COVID, selling a cup of coffee is considered essential, right? And we knew that we wanted to create a safe space for people to hop in, have a moment, breathe, relax for a second, and to receive perspective and just to have a form of an escape. So yeah, the coffee shop model was always a part of the plan. It just happened to come early because COVID pushed us to be flexible and changing things up a bit. But it was very necessary because we created a quick safe haven for the city as a whole. And I'm blessed to be a part of what we offered the city with so many other incredible organizations.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting because some people might be cynical and they think, well, okay, I hear the word safe space and I see you want to create something like that. So when people hear safe space, is that some, even if you're watching right now, you might, you may came from a different intersection, not necessarily appreciating all the facets of mental health. So you might hear safe space and think, well, what? You just put a poster up with some lifelines. How do you feel safe space? What is it that makes the space safe for some folks,
Yeah. So number one, what makes a safe space is first making sure that the people that work in the space, the facilitators, feel safe. And so I try very hard to create a very social, emotional work environment, right? Asking the staff, the volunteers, the employees, hey, what are your personal and business boundaries? What are some of the things you don't like, right? Because you have to make sure that they feel comfortable and they feel like the culture and the organization are meeting their needs, right? And paying them respectfully, right? That is the foundation. At the end of the day, that hasn't been easy, but I knew I had to start with, at bare minimum, the people. I had to make sure that I was okay, right? Now, that is the foundation because these are the people who are going to make sure that they're loving and very gentle. And they're going to be intentional about asking their patrons or the community, how are you? Are you okay? What do you need? Right? But you have to check with the culture that you're creating, the people who will facilitate. That is the foundation of any safe space. Who are the facilitators? Who are the people in charge, right? Now, past that, there's comfortable seating. Like the atmosphere is great. We're playing music that speaks to everyone. And it's just a comfortable environment. But none of that matters if the facilitators are not comfortable.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And that's really, this is one of the cool things about what you've been building here. And just for full disclosure, again, for folks who are joining us, I had the pleasure of getting to know Chris when I was at a previous organization. And as his vision was coming together, you couldn't necessarily, the programming wasn't all there. So you couldn't necessarily see what has grown into a very mature and sophisticated experience. And so you've got the brick and mortar, you walk in the door and there's great things happening in terms of the staff is prepared. But one of the things I really love to talk about is the fact that the way you have put, almost, let me use the phrase, it sounds weird, but you've impregnated the shop with a lot of programming, a lot of different sorts of activities. And I kind of want to talk about some of those things. You'll frame them as sessions, different sorts of things. Let's talk about some of those things, because I think in terms of, it's one thing when you walk in, you can have the experience and leave, but you've really created an opportunity for people to kick around and build community together. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. And I love how you phrase that. Impregnated. It's all about vision and bringing things to life, right? And so the coffee shop was one thing, but I wanted it to have many different layers and components, right? So when I think about Normalized Therapy University, which is our biggest initiative. So the coffee shop exists so we can raise funds on a daily basis to pay for people to go to one-on-one talk therapy, right? So we can the financial and emotional barriers, right? And on the other side of that, the reason why we call it Normalized Therapy University, because think about, people need to be educated about their mental health. You know that. That's your work. That's what you all do over there at the whole coalition, right? Your job is to build spaces so you can educate people about the importance and the whys and then what to do later, right? But with us, I always thought about church. You go to church, you have this good feeling, and then you go home and it's like, okay, what do I do now? I still have to deal with reality. Or if you were in college, okay, after you went to a party and you hung out with your friend, well, you got to go back to your dorm room and still feel the pressures of what it means to be a student athlete or a student with all this pressure of what am I going to do with my life? Or I know what I'm going to do, but it's hard. But what you remember from any group or any social gathering are the relationships and the bonds. And I wanted to unite the city and all these different labels, Black, white, trans, Hispanic, Asian, Latinx, all this stuff. I wanted to build a space within the shop where everybody can show up without any restrictions, and to create a space where they can talk about all of their shit, none bias, none judgment, no consequences, and to learn and see from one another. So it would give everybody permission to tell their story and to know, oh, even though I'm Black, this person is white, this person is Hispanic, etc., or Asian. Oh shit, we're all dealing with the same stuff. And in that, you create like this beautiful melting pot of a community where everybody are starting to see one another, and you're building relationships within the group, right? Which is essentially changing culture. Now someone on the north side that would never go to the south side can identify with somebody on other part of the city, when at first you would say, we have nothing in common. But you know what? You have a broken heart. You went through something traumatic. And it was important for the coffee shop to be able to house all of these different components so we can essentially walk people through their healing journey.
See, and that really hits home in a way that is a big missing feature nationally, globally, and even right in our own backyards in terms of the mental health situation. There's too much compartmentalization, and there's too much of a belief that mental health is just talking about a clinical diagnosis or a psychological injury, and ignoring all these intersections. And you're really hitting on them. You know, for folks, if you go and check out Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health, even just check out the Instagram, where it's a great place to see a lot of their programming, you know, promote itself. You do have things like, you got the group therapy sessions, right? But then you got talks. You got talks where you're pulling the intersection of music and discussion of different sort of cultural topics in there. How does that all, you know, on any given week, because it's cool if you check like your social media, you never really know what's going to pop off. So how do you build that? Is it kind of like you've got like a 6-month plan, or do something sort of get inspired? I saw you did a visual for Virgil, or you had a little like a recognition in his passing. And you know, how does your programming build? Is it collaborative? Is it kind of people make suggestions? How does that work?
It's a mixed bag. Number one is inspiration. I knew that we needed to have group therapy every week, but I wanted to be able to impact culture in a way that we're meeting them. We lose somebody like Virgil, who's from Chicago, right? You know, the same way we honored DMX in his passing, I understand that there's a community form of grief that happens in the hip hop and the fashion world, right? And by us being Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health, we are in tune. We're locked in, right? So there's our normal planning of how many group therapy sessions like to have, how many people we want to pay to go to therapy, which is 250 people per year. And then it's the inspiration that happened every day. Like the Virgil thing was meeting a community need. It was people that came to the coffee shop for the first time, but what brought them there? Virgil. Virgil was an inspiration to them. And I feel I have this natural thing where I'm bleeding or like feeling or seeing like the bloodshed from a painful and teary-eyed place that people sort of overlook every day because we just call it what it is. Oh, that's just, you know, people die every day or people cry every day, but there's nowhere to go to bleed and to cry and feel safe. And so we stay locked into the culture. We collaborate with many people, musicians, therapists, teachers, social workers. So it's a mixed bag of how that works. A lot of times I'm random, I'm gonna be honest. And there's times I'm winging it. And I'm like, oh shit, I gotta speak to the youth. So I'll be like, I got time, I got space, let's go get the space to the youth. Because I'm feeling look, I'm an empath, Carl. Like I feel it, even if I don't want to feel it, even if I don't want to acknowledge that I can feel it, I feel it. And so even though I have my plan, it's a mixed bag of what is already planned, what we desire to do, inspiration, guerrilla, winging it, and oh shit, we need to do that because look what happened over there because we didn't think of that. So, but I'm also not controlled. I'm not. No one owns me, right?
Right.
No one owns my organization. I'm not waiting like for someone to cut a check. That's the beauty of selling product every single day. So as much as we love and we appreciate donations, the reason why I wanted to function as a social entrepreneur, so if I'm ever inspired to help someone, I can, because we make money every day.
See, and that's really critical because I think it's important. You know, you're really showing, and I think it should be clear to folks who are engaged right now that you really got that visionary mindset. You know,
Yeah.
And I think, especially when we come back to you, you're touching on it a little bit in a way that some people might hear it and not understand or be able to appreciate the fact that, like, one of the big issues with mental health and the way intersections work and all that good stuff is that sometimes people want to put you into a box. And you, as an African American man, people think, all right, well, you're going to talk to only Black folks. And you touched on a little bit earlier how the space that you've created is breaking down also stigma barriers, which can make it easier for mental health too. And that's so powerful because people figure from your experience, well, you're just going to talk to a certain, it'll be wink, wink, a certain area of Chicago in this case. And you're not allowed to get out of that box, but everything you're doing is actually blowing down walls. And it's, you know, for folks, if you ever step foot into the cafe space, you are going to see people who in Chicago, like every other urban space, has a history of segregation. Just because we didn't have the separate drinking fountains doesn't mean we didn't have it. But here you've got a realness. So one of the interesting things, you know, like I mentioned at the top here, you're getting your flowers. And what I mean by that is that there are people starting to wake up to what you're doing. And I think it's been cool to see you had Today Show coverage, and you were, was that Kelly Clarkson? Was it?
Yeah.
So for you, now that there are some people getting to sort of wake up and realize it, what's been the process of taking that recognition and finding ways to drive it towards pushing further? What's that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, everything has been organic. And look, Carl, I'll give you the answer straight up. Everything is happening because I knew that COVID was extreme. And I knew the pandemic before this pandemic was a mental health crisis. And that was extreme. So when you look at the extreme human emergency of what mental health is and was prior to COVID, and then you add COVID on top of that, and the mental and the emotional and the financial fallout, I knew the only way I'm going to impact culture in our neighborhood, both local and national, and even across the pond, is I am going to have to be relentless, number one, but also extreme. So I set extreme goals. Let's give 10,000 families. And we did, and I put that goal out there from June. I mean, of course, you all were a part of it, from June to December. And we managed to take care of 8,000 families. But think about that time frame. You know, from June 13th to December 31st, we was able to do that because I knew we had to be extreme because the issues were extreme. But on the other side of that, from a marketing standpoint, I wanted to sort of throw out what would be defined as unrealistic because I knew everybody would tune in like, no, really? But your part of tuning in was, you're going to have to be a part of this. I want you to show up. So I knew it was some volunteers who were showing up to see, is this guy for real? Not everybody was showing up to really help. There was some people who was like, I want to know what this is about, or it's trendy, like to give, And I love what he does. It was a mixed bag of the whys behind why people showed up, and also guilt, right? Because of the George Floyd situation, all these different things, right? It was a mixed bag of emotions, but the overall feeling that we felt was people really gave a shit, right? Even in the midst of all the other people who probably came just because it was trendy and it was nosy and they wanted to challenge what I was saying, the higher percentage was people gave a shit. And in order to do so, you have to be extreme to pull those people in, because ultimately, Carl, everybody wants to be a part of something. So because of that extreme plan and that extreme initiative and extreme work, it was only right that everybody had to pay attention. It was only right. Now, could I have written this story that I was going to get love from the Kelly Clarkson show, the Today Show, every local newspaper or or like TV station? No. I just knew if I move and I put my head down and I get the work, I would get the right people attention. And that's really what I cared about. It wasn't about being on the news. It wasn't about having any sort of popularity. It was about, I need to be extreme so we can get an extreme amount of help.
Perfect. And that's exactly, I go back to it again. It is that visionary work, and you do gotta shake people up, and you've definitely been shaking it up. And I love that extreme thing. It's, shooting for the moon and above is probably the only way you're gonna break through a lot of, and I'll use the word cynicism, but I think even like basic social media and stuff like that, we can get bombarded with so many. There's a popular term right now, toxic positivity. So
yes,
we can see a lot of people put out a lot of smoke, but the fact is that you can never ever take a step forward into the world that you're building, into this community, and say that you're not doing it. You can see, it's in the nonprofit world, everyone likes to talk about transparency, which is important, but like you can see every step of the way where the mission and the vision are meeting and happening. And I think that brings us, so you started with a coffee shop, and you're creating a place that's not so much just a place, it's like a feeling and a spirit. But what?
No, actually, no, we want to go back. So Carl, like when I launched this look, I launched a concept, coffee, hip hop, and mental health, at Baseline in the city of Chicago in the South Loop. I had 20 people, myself, a moderator, Ross Irwin, who is our community engagement coordinator now, and I had one therapist, and I had some of my friends who perform, and I was like, that was a masseuse in the background, that was coffee inspired drinks at the bar, and this was July 7, 2019. It wasn't a nonprofit. It was an LLC. It was for profit, right? And because that's all I knew, coming from the music and business and the corporate marketing and sales, I only understood for profit. And what I'm doing today evolved the more I understood what this concept was, right? That's how we started. 20 people at Baseline, and I learned very, very fast that it's not about how many people show up, Carl. It's about who showed up. Because those 20 people, they start to share their feelings. They share their heart. They cry. They talk about how they've been impacted emotionally. And this is before COVID. And then a month and a half later at the promontory, like we had more than 100 plus people that showed up. And I'm like, oh, wow, all right. People want to talk about their mental health. And we continue to grow. And then we had our last public event on March 7th, 2020, right before like the world shut down. And what Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health was before I opened up the coffee shop, it was a music and discussion based event to do three things: to show the concept of coffee because of the mental and emotional breakdown, right? And then that was the networking hour, like the live DJ, and people have been acclimated in the space. And then here comes the hip hop, me and my friends on stage, live band, and we rock it out, right? And then the mental health like component is a panel of therapists having this interactive conversation. And then the world said, hey, COVID is here, and we couldn't do anything. And so right away, I had to figure out what was next, like all of us, right? And so I started telling stories and getting other people across the country to share their story with this concept called storytellers, right? And then it was like they're closing grocery stores on the South and West Side. Okay, so then we started focusing on food insecurity because COVID exacerbated if you were in survivor mode, right? If you're already struggling. But the biggest thing was your gut is your second brain. If you don't eat right, you're not going to behave right, right? And so it was still doing mental health work, but it was meeting people where they are quickly. And then I said, well, in order to keep this work going, there are people messaging me, asking me about a therapist. So I'm going to Psychology Today, and I'm like finding people therapists. This is all going on in COVID, right? And then by the time it gets to like August, I'm selling merchandise and coffee beans at Sip and Savor Coffee Shop, right? And then I'm like, okay, we need more food. We need to pay people to therapy. So I said, hey, let me think about bringing this coffee concept shop to life now. And we started in Boxville for about a month plus. And I said, this isn't sustainable because the same people I'm trying to service can't afford like to buy a $8 to $10 cup of coffee every day. It just doesn't make sense. And so then we moved to the North Side. And that's how that whole thing started.
And you're in a bit of you're in a bit of movement right now too, right?
Yeah, so the cool thing is we try to get how can I say it? We like tried to get a lease at the location that we were at, 3243 North Broadway. It didn't work out. And we, as grateful as we are for that opportunity, I was relentless of building a permanent flagship. And so as we were in transition, Lululemon, who we partnered with, they said, hey, we love what you're doing. We can offer you a space. They shut down a cafe so we can open. And we've been there since September 15th. And it's been amazing, right? But the beautiful thing, after all of that work, now we're in the process of building our own brick and mortar, our own flagship coffee shop, Normalized Therapy Cafe, that's slated to open in April. And I'm excited. But we knew that we needed, look, as a founder and the CEO of this organization, again, relentless, extreme goals. I just entered the coffee business last September. I mean, technically, at that August, September time is when I really entered the coffee business. Like the first time I sold a bag of beans was the day I entered the coffee business. Carl, I never knew or understood the coffee business. I just had a mental and emotional breakdown inside of a coffee space that was my safe haven for the day. And so it was only right that we continue with that, right? But to look at how I began to now, and I have a staff that I can trust and a loyal team, and we built such an amazing community. I'm talking about 4,000 plus volunteers, 6,900 plus customers who have frequent the coffee shop. We sell merchandise online every day, 3 to 4 pieces of merch, whether it's hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts. But it's because I focus on not how many, but who. That's the motto, man. You got to focus on who, not how many. Because if you get caught up in the how many, you will always be searching for how many would show up rather than who.
That's so beautiful. And it's, it's a quality over quantity type of thing. Excuse me.
All day.
Well, I think this is, and just to sort of from a direct business standpoint, you were moving around and you're now going into a new physical space eventually, but you've been able to be hosted in a current space right now. Can you think about when it comes to just from a little bit of fun chatter here, what have been some interactions that have stood out to you in the space since you've been running and had these things? I'm sure it's so many, but I don't know, maybe one or two that sort of have stuck with you over the months and weeks since you've been rolling?
Yeah. So some of the things that stood out, man, like it's the reason why we created a Unite Chicago campaign, because let's say like we was doing like the psychology of Kanye West and we breaking down like his catalog, right? You got every race in the room, every age group. Or we was having a conversation about Black adoption, and you got every race in the room, but you also have a 60-year-old woman from the South Side that said, I'm just now learning about who I am today. And so you got the teen, like the college student, like the mother and son. You got all these different races, and you got that 18 to 60 plus in one room talking about the same stuff. I mean, Carl, like, it doesn't get any more beautiful than that. Even trans, you know, when you think about the trans community or the or like someone who's a part of the who's considered homosexual or gay, and then like this super straight person, and then this super political person, and then this wealthy person or this poor person, all in the same room, right? I'm not good with labels, so I'm not going to like pronounce everyone's, you know, whatever, and that's the point. Don't get caught up in the labels and who you are. I only care about community, and I care about everybody the same. And like the thing I walk away with every day and what I continue to see every week is what stands out all the time is a melting pot of people that sit in these rooms together, loving and encouraging one another and building friendships outside of the room. That's the thing that stands out most. And that's what continues to encourage me. So that's why we went from, you know, not the People's Food Drive to the People's Coffee Shop to now just Normalized Therapy Cafe, because we realize that while everybody's invited, everyone needs to normalize something. And what that one thing is we all have in common is our brain. And we need a safe space to be able to unpack and get some help.
And, you know, that's important as we're sort of winding down here, is that you don't present yourself as being the all-knowing clinician expert who's got the best-selling book and read this and it's all settled. I think it's important to that, and I want, you know, our viewers right now to sort of embrace the idea that it's okay to say that I'm not a specialist and I don't know everything. You touched on something there that is, it could be a tempest in a teapot if somebody was sloppy, right? Which is things like pronouns. How do we want to be identified? How do we want to be recognized? I mean, and the discussion of pronouns is part of the bigger idea of all of our identities, from cultural and social. And I think too often people think that the only way that we can have these conversations is if it's only an expert or it's only someone else. And being able to stand out front and say, I'm here to learn, listen, and grow, there's not a lot of that. And that you're being a leader by, you're holding the space, but you're also wanting to be a part of it and learn from it. I think that's very powerful, because people seeing that you're willing to learn and grow as much as be there to help others join in conversations that can help them learn and grow. That's going to be so much better than, I feel like we've spent a lot of time over the past years just watching people say, I know everything, follow me, and don't think about, you know what I mean? So, and I think that you, again, it's a good example you're setting. And, you know, I think it would be a fair question. You know, we don't all have crystal balls, but you're working on opening up a new physical space. And so I think the place to sort of taper things down is, what do you see next coming up? You know, sort of the plays. And I don't know if you keep things like close to the chest for like, or you haven't written it yet, but like, what do you kind of see happening for you in the next couple, we'll call it months for right now, right?
Yeah. No, like, I do keep it all close to the chest, but I also leave room. And I'll say this, I tell business owners all the time that, especially now, that you do have to keep it close to the chest, and you have to have you have to be able to leverage flexibility in your business plan. So as much as I may have a plan, the reason why I'm able to meet something new so quickly, because there's room to be flexible. And even though we are a nonprofit, we're a very multifaceted brand of a nonprofit, so we can change the way we do the work. And you have to be multifaceted so you can have multiple streams and multiple ways of engaging such a complex community, right? Because the world is so complex. And so for me, Carl, yeah, when we open up these doors, the same work that we are doing now would just continue. It would evolve. It would get greater. We're going to focus our sites more firmly on targeted areas in the city of Chicago, which is difficult because we went from focusing primarily on the Black and brown community or any marginalized like community to now servicing every type of human being in the city of Chicago, which inspired me to say, you know what? It's time to open up our biggest initiative, Normalized Therapy, nationally. And that was the point of going on those national shows like a Today Show and the Kelly Clarkson and all the different things that are to come, because we're getting ready to not only pay for people who are in Chicago, but we're going to pay for people who are in Ohio, who are in New York, LA, all across the country slowly. That's what I see within the next 6 months, but also creating healing circles all over the country, the way we do it. And that's the thing. Everybody can do group therapy. Anybody who cares can do healing circles, but there's something very special about how we do it. And I think that is the secret to our success. I come from a very raw place. I tell my people all the time, it doesn't matter how passionate and how confident I may appear and present. I'm still healing in real time with all of you. I only know the little that I know, but as I'm climbing up the healing hill, I'm pulling people up with me. Hey, look, come up here, and you may surpass me, and that's cool because healing is a marathon. It isn't a race, right? It's not a competition to see who can heal the fastest. It's we all got shit, and as long as I'm on this hill, I want to bring so many people up. And that's what I foresee in a very immediate future, continuing to hold space for people to show up and be their authentic self. Because if you give people permission to be themselves, it's going to change relationships. It's going to change communities. It's going to change households. It's going to change workspaces. It's going to change people ultimately. And I get a kick out here and people say, when they leave a session, Carl, we talked about this on the way home, or girls' night turned to this, or fellas, we were out smoking cigars and we started talking about group therapy. That's the point. That is the normalization of therapy that I anticipated. Not just when you show up in the room with us, but so you can take it home. And that's what we're going to do more so than anything. Skip all the cool stuff. The goal is to train people to create these same spaces at the crib.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. And I don't think we can, I don't think you can get much better than that in terms of winding it down. So I really, excuse me, I really want to just, again, Christopher LeMark, thank you so much for making time. You're a busy cat. And I just really appreciate you making time for us to connect and share your
always
message.
Man. Always, Carl.
If you're watching right now or you're watching this content after the festival, you will see down in the content boxes all the links to find all you need to know about coffee, hip hop, mental health, and Christopher LeMark's amazing efforts and journey. And once again, thank you so much, Christopher, for being with us. And I hope you have a great, blessed day. Take care, my man.
You too. Have hope, brother. And be safe.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.